Hello and welcome to week 3, chapter 5, PowerPoint lecture. And this week we are talking about, get this open, planning and decision making. Okay, so this chapter goes over the benefits and pitfalls of planning, how to make a plan that works, how companies can use plans at all management levels from top to bottom, explains the steps and limits to rational decision making, and how group decisions and group decision making techniques can improve decision making. And first thing is planning. Choose a goal. Developing a method or strategy to achieve a goal has advantages and disadvantages. The benefits of planning: efforts are intensified, leads to persistence, provides direction, encourages the development of past strategies, works for both companies and individuals. So it's like having a plan of going on vacation to a specific place. And there's people that just want to get into the car and drive there, or on a plane and get there. And the actual trip itself is irrelevant. They just want to get to where they're going and enjoy the vacation. And that is planning. Okay? Then the disadvantages of that is it impedes change. So if all of a sudden you see something that would be nice to stop and actually enjoy or learn or experience, you don't do that because the plan doesn't call for it. It prevents or slows needed adaptation. Um, look at what happened this past few months with COVID-19, the coronavirus. If your plan was that you were going to produce, for an example, produce cars, General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Fiat. Their plan was to produce gas cars, and then they had to shut the plants down for 2 months. It was a great time to convert something over to an electric car. You could have converted over to 2021 models. You could have readjusted the allocation to know what would sell and what wouldn't. Obviously, if we're going to go into a major recession or depression, commercial vehicles, heavy-duty trucks aren't going to be big sellers when we have an economic slowdown. So you could have adapted if you weren't stuck to your plan. None of the three did, by the way. They just idled the plants for 2 months. Now they're starting them back up this week or next without even thinking about making any changes other than not producing as many vehicles that they were planning on. But that's about the only change. By the way, the number of sales on an annualized basis went from a little over 16 million to 8.2 million for April. So it was basically in half. So they could have adapted and maybe made the change over to electric or to a different purpose of it, but they chose not to because they were stuck to their plan. It creates a false sense of certainty. If you have a plan, you think it's going to work, and that's it. You have blinders on, and you're going to make it. And it leads to detachment of planners. Kind of like going through college. If you have a set plan that this is what you're going to do, and that's all you're going to stick with, then you're going to persevere and get through it. You might have missed a completely different major that you might have flourished and enjoyed, and may have had a great career in that other major, but that wasn't the plan. Whereas people that have semi of a plan, but we'll see what happens, they may try something different and go from there. For example, Steve Jobs, he said the best class he ever had in college, and he dropped out of college. But the best class he ever had was calligraphy, which is why we have so many different font styles today, was just because he fell in love with calligraphy and then he incorporated that into the apple. Had he never taken calligraphy, we may only have Times Roman, and that's it. Okay, so this is what I want. So how to make a plan work that works. You set goals, you develop commitment, you develop effective action plans, who, what, when, how. You track the progress toward the goal, and you maintain flexibility. And that's by revisiting the plan and begin planning process anew. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. If it isn't measurable, it is not a goal, it's a dream. Okay, so if you're just going to continue on till you win without any type of measuring how you're doing or how you're progressing, then it's not a goal, it's just a dream. So your goal commitment, you set goal participatively, making goals public so that everybody is aware of what they are, and obtaining top management support. If you don't have top management support, it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, then you have the action plan, which lists the specific steps, people, resources, and time period needed to attain the goal. They must be realistic yet challenging. And then the methods for tracking proximal goals, short term goals, or sub goals, and then distal goals, long term, or primary goals. Option based planning, keeping options open by making small, simultaneously investments in many alternative plans, and leaving commitments open by maintaining slack resources. Okay. And then planning from the top to bottom, you start with your mission, get down to your tactical plans, and then you get down to the actual operations to make them work. You have the purpose statement, declaring the company's purpose, reason for existence, and what your objectives are. Unifies the company-wide efforts, stretches challenges to the organization, and possessions the finish line. How do you know when you've actually reached the goal? The middle management then takes it to the tactical and objectives, and then the lower management actually does the operations and carries it out. Okay. You have single-use plans, which are one time and done. You have standard plans, which you use repeatedly, things that have recurring events, like with retail and Christmas. Recurring events, you have your plan. A one-time single-use plan might just be if you're having a special going out of business sale, well, that's a one-time plan. And then budgets, managing, deciding how to allocate available money to meet the goals. Decision making is the process of choosing the solution. If you can't choose a solution, then you can't actually implement something. And you go through a systematic process of defining the problem, evaluating alternatives, and choosing what you think is optimal for the solutions. Obviously, if something dramatic happens, like a pandemic, then it probably wasn't an optimal solution. You have to define the problem. What is the actual problem? Many people just say what the symptoms are, where they actually don't get down to the problem. For example, there's a problem with higher education even before this pandemic, was a low graduation rate. Why are students not staying in college to graduate within 6 years? And a symptom could be that the students had life circumstances where they had to go out and get a full-time job. That's a symptom. That's not the underlying problem. You'd have to research it and find out what the actual problem is of why students aren't staying in college to graduate, and why we have less than half that actually do graduate within 6 years. Weighing it, absolute comparison versus relative comparison, evaluating it, and then computing the optimal decision. Okay, and then once you do that, you manage to operate in a perfect world with no real world constraints. Well, obviously that doesn't happen. limited to the resources that you have, and manages satisficing choosing good enough alternative when you don't have the means to get the best alternative. Additions and advantages and pitfalls of group decision making. Advantages, defining the problem, you get a lot more creativity, a lot more input, a lot of people from different points of view, and generating alternative solutions, the same thing. The pitfalls are groupthink, where everyone disagrees to agree, or no one wants to disagree with the person who has the most power, or people are just like to be agreeable, they don't want confrontation, or people just truly think that what they came up with is the best. And that's the reason for the Challenger explosion. That's one of the most famous case studies. If you ever want to look up a case study of why the case study on groupthink, excuse me, it's one of the most famous groupthink case studies that there is why the Challenger exploded and what caused it. As far as the process, we all know mechanics why it happened, but as far as the human process of why we let it happen, came down to groupthink. Types of conflict: C type of conflict, cognitive, focuses on a problem and issue. A type conflict was affective, focuses on individual and personal issues. Devil's advocate assigns an individual or subgroup for the role of critic. Come up with everything that's wrong with the ideas and see if the other side can correct them, or if the devil's advocate actually shows the weakness of, of the decision, of the process. And then nominal group techniques begins and ends by having group members write down and evaluate ideas. If you're writing it down and putting it in a bin where nobody knows who wrote what, then you feel freer to express yourself, and that you don't aren't going to be criticized. You have the Delphi technique. Members of the panel of experts respond to questions to each other until reaching an agreement on the issue. And lastly, the electronic brainstorming. You know, working from home, that's the ultimate right now. It'd be even better if we could do it anonymously so that people feel completely free to write down what they feel, or ideas. They're not afraid to write ideas down, being thinking that they may get criticized. Okay? And so that is the end of chapter 5.